Hi, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Cross-Border Confidence, Payments, Permissions, and Global Compliance. I am Renshi Olivier, and with me I have Nashma Salman, Chen Yu, and Humphrey Wallenbreder. Welcome. Payments in 2025 stand at a critical juncture. What was once a unified drive toward global efficiency has evolved into a competitive landscape of diverse market systems, each guided by its own principles, capabilities, and constraints. In today's environment, the way in which money moves are as significant as the amount that moves. The global financial system is increasingly shaped by non-financial factors, including data governance, energy limitations, and technology. This growing divergence in payment systems reflects a broader transformation of the financial sector into a tapestry of regions, each operating under its distinct standards, timelines, currencies, and trust mechanisms. Nashma, let's start with you. What factors are contributing to this accelerated growth within the payment space?
Thank you, Renshi. I would say, I don't know if payments are accelerating or the world is shrinking in some ways. Technically, there have been a lot of factors that have contributed to making the world a smaller place, let's say. Obviously, digitization of payments, that has been a major factor in later times, but also just the globalization, the fact that very many different new corridors for trade and for payments are being explored, and lots of innovation in that space is coming as well. On top of that is consumer expectation, where literally every phone is now a banking branch, right? Where people expect that they can make cross-border payments in real time, with least amount of fees involved, with high amount of transparency. And these factors have all come together to make sure that international payments have grown, but to a large extent that the global economy is looking smaller and smaller in the sense of even corridors. When you think about bilateral corridors, lots of multilateral agreements between governments on how to settle payments within specific corridors, these are being made easier by many means as well. So all of these factors have really come together to contribute to making it seem like payments are going higher, but it's more like the world is coming together.
I like the way that you summarize that. And as cross-border payments industry continues to expand rapidly, Humphrey, what strategic and innovative actions should payment service providers to consider to remain competitive?
Well, I think based on what I just heard from the prior speakers, it would be quantum technology, but I have no clue how to do that. I think in the short term, it's convergence, and I can only talk about the institutional side. I think there's a difference between institutional payments and trade and the retail world. I think what you do see is that the regulators that you talked about at your introductions are still trying to catch up to get grips around the speed by which the world is now moving with new kind of use cases and technology. And what you see is not all regulators move with the same speed and have the same understanding of that technology, which creates a non-level playing field. And I think what we need to try to do is educate the participants throughout the whole value chain and make sure that the benefits of what the technology can offer can be applied in a safe and secure way like we did with the traditional rails.
Okay. And Chen, as cross-border payments providers continue to grow in scale and influence, what role are they playing in shaping the economy? And specifically, if we consider enabling international trade, like Nashma mentioned, or supporting financial inclusion and fostering greater connectivity between markets and driving innovation in how we move value across borders.
Yeah, I think cross-border payments is really the mission-critical infrastructure for the global economy. It's kind of the bloodline for the international trade, right? And comparing to the more traditional financial institutions, payment service providers are relatively more flexible. You can see them as the innovation sandboxes. They're actually more at the cutting edge of adopting emerging technologies like AI, blockchain and stable coins, right? And after COVID, basically you see this acceleration of digital adoption, digital transformation, especially in a lot of the traditional sectors. So a lot of the enterprise clients are actually moving away from the traditional payment rails into adopting new emerging technologies provided by payment service providers to make their cross-border transactions more efficiently. And what I'm trying to say is that the digital adoption not only happens on the consumer side, but also on the enterprise and also in the cross-border side, right? So this is actually the macro trend we see in the payment landscape. So as a payment service provider, definitely, it can be the most important enabler in this digital transformation for the traditional sectors.
And so the UAE is regarded as a pioneer in cross-border payments and setting regional and global benchmarks through its focus on innovation, regulation, clarity, and infrastructure modernization. Humphrey, what valuable lessons are there that we can learn from other economies?
I think a lot. I think people can learn a lot from what's happening in the UAE. Likewise, I think what you see, for instance, in Brazil, where the interaction between the central bank and the market participants has started at the level of introducing blockchain technology. They had PIX, they have DREX now, they have a domestic play and a cross-border play. I think it's the interaction of government regulators and market participants where I think, and I think it is happening, that this region can also benefit at looking at these models. And the big, I think, party in the room is what's happening in the US. I think what you see is in the US, the developments are going so fast in the last 8 to 10 months that I think that the close alignment of using what's relevant, Genius Act, legislation, translating that into the use cases and regulations, I think that is where the UAE also needs to stay closely attuned to what's happening there.
So Chen, I saw you nodding your head around the lessons learned from the UAE. Is there anything that you would like to add?
Well, I think UAE really sits in a strategic crossroads, right? Connecting East and West, the global North and global South. Essentially, UAE does business with everyone, so it actually has this neutrality in terms of the global trade, international trade, right? Because with the geopolitical shift and tariff wars and everything, there's going to be this. I think the entire global trade network and the supply chain is actually being realigned and restructured, right? So this presents a lot of challenges, but at the same time, a lot of the new opportunities. So UAE definitely sits in a very strategic position to leverage that.
Najma, what are the key factors that could weaken confidence in cross-border payments, and what strategies and measures can be implemented to mitigate these risks?
I think to what Humphrey mentioned earlier, the regulatory framework is very critical because there are a lot of players and a lot of authentic players, but also not so authentic players that are there in the market. And it's the regulatory framework that would help with ensuring to a large extent. Also, some of the new age technology, perhaps not meant to be heavily regulated, but more transparent and so on. But from a risk perspective, there are many factors that could come in that could make the trust factor go off. It's literally trust has to go as digital as payments are trying to go, right? So be it cybersecurity risk or be it the fact that FX, whether that goes through well, there's operational risks. If a payment doesn't go through, then you lose the trust. And to the earlier point, it's not just FIs, this has actually explored the space of retail as well. So it's the individual at the end who perhaps doesn't always understand all the technology that comes behind it. So it's so important to get that right when it comes to the FX, when it comes to liquidity for the bigger payments, the bigger amounts, whether the new players can bring in the amount of liquidity that's needed at the back end of such transfers, payments, cross-border. So all of this plays a major factor when it comes to risk and how cross-border payments are evolving at the moment. It's definitely something that we need to go into, the digital space. I mean, it's everything's going digital, and payments do have to go digital as well. But we need to build it on the framework of all these things taken care of, because it's not that one big problem that people are scared of. It's all of these little frictions that come in the payment that make people withdraw from adapting to new technologies. So it's very important that we get that whole framework in place and have the right kind of regulatory setup as well required for these cross-border payments, and to build the trust that is needed in this. Because you're basically as strong as your weakest link in the payment, right? So even if it's from the originator or the beneficiary who's supposed to receive the funds, or the technology that went through it, or the financial institution, or the regulator that's come in between it, if any of this is a weak link, it actually breaks the trust and it breaks the whole system. So it's very important that we have that trust in place.
So Najma, would you say then that all stakeholders that play a role has a responsibility to ensure that trust is built and maintains?
Definitely. I mean, I think no doubt traditionally it has been that this kind of responsibility is looked from a regulatory space. You look at the central banks to do this. But now with a lot of new players, I think the trust as such should always have been the case. But the banks, the financial institutions that are there in the setup, the fintechs that either operate independently or collaborate with the financial institutions, the corporates that are involved in this, if that responsibility is not taken over by them as well, that they do responsible methods of making cross-border payments and do not use any kind of loopholes to fail the system. So I think basically every person is a player in this and should have that responsibility to make sure that cross-border payments are safe.
So cross-border payments continue to grow in scale and complexity. Chen, what are the main risks that stakeholders should be aware of? So as Najma mentioned, all stakeholders carrying responsibility. And how can these risks be mitigated through technological solutions?
There are a lot of risks associated with the cross-border payments. I mean, for example, in a lot of the emerging markets, or maybe we call the frontier markets, right? There's this problem with the FX shortage, FX volatility, and also there are a lot of the regulatory barriers for cross-border transactions. And as a payment service provider, a lot of the times you also have to face the different kind of the messy and fragmented regulatory landscape, right? So these are the issues that we need to address by leveraging emerging technologies, but also we need to work with the regulators in different jurisdictions to come up with solutions to address the problems with these cross-border payments. I mean, one of the applications of emerging AI technology is really to address the netting problems between different markets. For example, if you're targeting emerging markets, you can actually use smart routing, powered by the AI technologies to make your netting solutions more efficiently, right? So there are a lot of the applications like that. We can actually improve the cross-border transactions and settlements. Yeah.
And Chen, what role should regulators, financial institutions, and payment providers play in managing and monitoring these risks to ensure a secure, efficient, and trustworthy cross-border ecosystem?
Well, first of all these different players need to work together. From the regulator's perspective, they need to focus more on guaranteeing the bottom line, kind of safeguarding the bottom line instead of capping the top line, right? I think that's essentially very critical, especially when we're seeing a lot of the emerging new technologies because you don't want to you don't want to actually choke the innovations that which could be brought upon by emerging technologies like stablecoins and blockchain, right? And from the payment service provider side, because they're relatively more flexible compared to the conventional financial institutions, so they should also lead the technology innovations.
Humphrey, what role does crypto play in all of this?
A big role. I think it's the game changer now. I don't know if it's as big as quantum computing, but I think what you do see is that the nature of what we're doing in the blockchain. Let's first do one step back. I think we're talking about blockchain as technology and crypto as a form of digital money. I think if the question is on blockchain, I think it's the game changer in the space of cross-border payments and many use cases also in capital markets in B2C. I think crypto is a specific form of digital money that will coexist with tokenized deposits, stable coins, tokenized fiat, and real fiat money. So I think crypto per se is really a driver to look for adoption of the other kind of solutions. But that is not, for me, the big game changer. The big game changer is the blockchain technology, which is now used widespread. And then I think, to your prior question, but please interrupt me if I'm taking too much time. I think the regulators shouldn't do anything different than what they did for the last 600 years. They need to do what they always did, ensure that the system is protected against those that don't mean well to the system. Yeah? And for that, they need to know what they don't know, and they need to know what they need to know.
So over and above the regulatory's role that they're playing, what other elements would have and carry some form of responsibility to ensure the sustainable future of cross-border payments?
Well, it starts to, again, you really need to understand what it's used for. And ultimately, payments is a mean to an end. It's not an objective in itself. What we're trying to assure is more reach, more efficiency, new use cases as well. Because we haven't spoken about that yet, there's also the element of new use cases. So this new technology doesn't move old technology to new technology for the same use cases. What you will see is new use cases. Programmability of money. You didn't have that. Shared ledgers, which allow for intraday transactions. So there's a whole new playing field where the regulators need to make sure that they look at the same angle of mitigating the risk without stopping innovation. And I think it's a fine line that you need to tread, but ultimately you don't want to get it wrong. Yeah? So from a regulatory perspective, you need to be conservative, but the genius is out of the bottle, so you need to catch up now. Yeah?
And to add on to that, Jane, how, and if you've seen it elsewhere in globally, how would AI play a role in in supporting the compliance element of cross-border payments?
I think in general, payment and fintech in general is one of the best testing grounds for AI, right? Because AI thrives on data, and payments naturally generates massive amounts of data that can be used to train different models. Except in the past, most of the applications of AI technology in payment space has been discriminative AI instead of generative AI. And generally, you can see two categories of applications of AI in payments, cross-border payments, right? One category is basically what we call the bottom line applications. Basically, you use AI to safeguard the integrity of your transactions, like for risk management, anti-money laundering, CFT, right? It's kind of the bottom line, right? And the other category is the top line applications of AI. Basically, you leverage AI to enhance user experience for your customer support, for streamlining your onboarding process, right? So AI definitely has a lot of the revolutionary applications in payment space. Thank you.
Nashma, Jane, Humphrey, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us.